In this video, we're going to tie Borski's slider. This is a good redfish and bonefish fly. First thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in a set of yellow lead eyes. We want to take our thread about 1/3 of the way back from the eye of the hook. We want to make sure we do leave some room right up there by the eyes. Then we're just going to make sure these eyes are nice and secure. And you can use super glue to really make sure that they don't go anywhere. Then we're going to take our thread, and I like to take it back about a hook eye's length away from those lead eyes. And we're going to take some craft fur, in either tan or a sand color. And we're going to take all the big, bulky, fluffy fibers out of the butt ends. We want our tail to be about 2.5 to 3 times the length of the shank of the hook. Once I get it measured out, I trim to the end, the size that I want, and I'm just going to tie it right in and wrap down the shank all the way to the bend. Once we do that, we're ready to tie in some flash, and I'm just going to use 3 strands of pearl crystal flash. I'm going to tie 3 strands on each side. If you like more or less flash, you can either add more or add less. It's just personal preference. I'm going to trim it to just a hair longer than the craft fur tail we just tied in. And I can see that tail is fairly sparse. The slider usually is not tied very bulky, so you have to be careful that you don't use too much material. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in a little bit of hackle. I'm just using some basic strung hackle, just some brown or tan. You can also use whiting bugger hackle or bugger packs. Both will work just fine. I'm going to tie in this hackle at the back there. Make sure it's nice and secure. I'm just going to take this hackle, I'm going to palmer it forward, but as I wrap it forward, I am going to stroke the feathers back. I want all these fibers to lay back on the fly. It's supposed to look like legs on a shrimp or some type of little saltwater critter. Once I get to those eyes, I can just capture it with my thread. And I can trim it out of there. Before I go forward, I really want to make sure all these fibers are really laying back. You can even take a few wraps right behind those eyes to really get all those fibers to lay back, just like so. And what I found at this point of the fly, it's actually a little easier if you actually invert it. I'll raise it up here just a little bit for you. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the collar. And the collar kind of acts as a dual purpose. It is both a collar and kind of a weed guard as well. And for the collar, we're just going to use some deer hair. And I cut out about a chunk that's about 3/4 of a diameter of a pencil. Then I'm just going to lay this onto the top of the fly here, and I'm just going to measure. I want the collar to cover the entire point of the hook, and I want it to just reach back, maybe slightly, just almost reaching the bend of the hook. Then once I have it in place, I'm just going to pinch it off. Then I'm going to trim off all these butt ends. I'm not going to need those. And then all I'm going to do is take a nice loose wrap to capture all that deer hair, and then just tie it right in. Just like so. you trap a few hackle fibers, not a big deal. You can trim those out of there. And the butt ends here don't play a huge part, so I usually do trim them down fairly close. I just want little nubs. It will cover up a little bit of our thread work on the head, but they really don't serve too much of a purpose other than that. Then I'm going to take my thread to just in front of the eye, or the lead eyes, and now we're ready for our head. And for the head of this fly, it's just made out of deer hair as well, except this time we're going to use a fair bit or more deer hair. We're going to use about the diameter of a pencil, or a little bit thicker, depending on the size that you're tying. And usually the thickness of just a little more of a diameter of pencil is about all I can handle on my fingers usually. We're going to pull out all the fluffy and short fibers. And to prepare the fur, we're actually going to trim off all the tips as well. So we just end up with the blunt ends. Then I'm going to take this nice generous clump of deer hair and I'm going to lay it onto the shank. I'm going to do two loose wraps of thread right on top of each other. I'm going to let go of the material and just let it spin around the head of the fly. And then I'm going to take my thread and just work it to the eye of the hook. Once I get to the eye, I'm actually going to take my thread and jump in front of all that deer hair. You can raise the fly up at this point. And all I'm trying to do is just get in there in front of all this deer hair. I don't want any clumps facing forward. Just like so. And then you can whip finish. Again, you do want to try to not trap any of that deer hair. With each whip finish, I just kind of stroke it all back out of the way. Now we get to trim the head. I'll flip it back to the normal view here for you. And this will be the underside of the fly, because this fly will ride hook up and eyes down. So this side isn't too important. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take it and just give it a flat top haircut. Just straight atop, just straight across. We actually want the fibers to be a little bit shorter than those lead eyes, because we do want this fly to ride flush on the bottom of the flat on the sand with those eyes on the ground. So we just trim it flat, nice and flush, and then we trim kind of a blocky head on the other side. And a lot of this is personal preference. If you like a real slim head, I've seen a lot of people trim them really, really slim, but I actually like a bit of a blocky head. And you do want to make sure you can see those yellow eyes. You trim all around them so that they are exposed. You want to make sure also you don't trim your collar. Keep all those fibers separate from your collar. Once you get your head trimmed, that's pretty much the the finished fly. I can always do a better job at trimming. Probably could have spun a little bit more deer hair just to make it a little bit more full. But that is the basic idea of the slider there. Then to finish the fly, you can take a marker you can just pull the tail and the flash nice and tight. You can just add little barring to the tail and the flash. Just kind of makes it look a little bit more shrimpy. It really adds a good look to the fly. There we go. That is how the fly will ride in the water. It will ride just like so, with the hook facing up, with those eyes down. You can kind of stroke all that deer hair back. But very effective fly. Works on a lot of species of fish. And you can find all the materials to tie this fly on our website, intheriffle.com.